Hello everybody, Ellery here, and today I'm going to be doing a Fire Emblem full series tier list. Now, you might be wondering, who is this person and why do I care what they think about Fire Emblem? Well, if you'll give me just a few minutes and listen to one or two things that I have to say, you can decide for yourself if you want to stick around for the rest of the video. I have a lot of things to say about some of these games, so this is going to be a long video, and there will be plenty of controversial placements. So put on your boots, equip Move Plus 2, and get ready to run into the comments at full speed to let me know what you agree or disagree with. I'm honestly happy to receive any kind of feedback on this video. For now, let me just move myself out of the way so that I'm not blocking everything that matters. And with that, let's get the rankings underway. So first I want to talk about Fire Emblem 7, because that's a game that I think a lot of people coming to this video probably care about and they want to hear my opinion about. Fire Emblem 7, I think, is a really fantastic game. It has like these really colorful characters, really memorable characters that everybody grows very attached to, and I think it's one of the reasons that this game is so popular. It also has those kind of like golden age Fire Emblem, like peak Game Boy Advance mechanics and battle animations that a lot of people are still in love with even to this day. There's a reason why like Fire Emblem 6, 7, and 8 content is still some of the most popular content on YouTube, despite all of the newer games coming out in the meantime. If I have one complaint about this game that probably keeps it out of the S tier, it's that you have these mandatory deployment slots for Hector, Eliwood, and Lyn for many sections of the game. I'm not a huge fan of this, and it's because the Game Boy Advance games are very deterministic already. So, like, for example, like you've got Matthew, and he's a thief, and he can only promote into one class. You've got Sane, and like you always know what his growths are going to be, you always know what his bases are going to be. He's always a Cavalier, and he's always going to promote into a Paladin. And in a way, I think this is a big reason why things like randomizers are very popular. But if I'm just looking at the base game, it does mean that the units that you can effectively use to do a single playthrough are fairly limited. And if you want to use like these creative like bench units or like the units that don't normally see a lot of play, it's very difficult because of those limited deployment slots. So it's like, yes, I want to use, this character that I've never used before, but in a couple of chapters I have to deploy Hector, and I have to deploy Eliwood, and I have to deploy Lyn, and it's like I need my main combat carry units that are actually going to get me through this chapter. And not only that, but the number of deployment slots in this game is actually pretty low for a typical Fire Emblem game. So it's like you just don't have room to use the characters that you want to use. And with that being said, I mean, the game is still fantastic to play through from start to finish. But on that note, though, I am going to move on to Fire Emblem 6 next. Now, this is a game that I really love. I am going to put it just above Fire Emblem 7 in the A tier, although I think these games are very close in terms of quality. But the things that people dislike about Fire Emblem 6 don't particularly bother me too much as a player, like the low hit rates, for example. Now, do I wish that axes and lances in particular were a little bit better so that they were equal with swords, so the game was a little more balanced? Yes, that would be nice. But the fact that my attacks have a chance of missing isn't the issue that bothers me personally. So I think it makes for a really great Iron Man experience when you're playing this game, and it's because you never really know for sure how your actions are going to turn out, and that means you have to approach the game with a different style of strategy. You have to keep in mind, like, if this misses, what do I do to recover? And sometimes you'll be in a situation where it's like, okay, this attack has to hit, and if it misses, I'm in a lot of trouble. So do I take that risk, or do I just wait and play defensively for a turn and see what happens, on the next phase? But if you do that, then the enemies are going to gain a little bit of momentum, and there's just so many shifts in the flow of the battle and your tactical positioning, and it just makes for really interesting battles, just for me personally. Another thing about this game is that there's a lot of characters, and not many of them have much of a personality. I find it really fun when I'm playing to go into the character screens and read the character descriptions, because a lot of them just say, like, he's a knight from Ostia. And that's all you know about this character. It's a stark contrast to what I praised about Fire Emblem 7, which has these great and memorable characters. But that's fine. If there was one thing that I would change about this game, I would make it more convenient to understand when there is a secret requirement for a Gaiden chapter. So like if I was going to make a ROM hack of Fire Emblem 6, one of the things that I would do is that at the start of like chapter 8, for example, I would have like a notification pop up and it says, you know, to unlock the Gaiden chapter, Lucina must remain alive. And for one of the later chapters, like the desert chapter, I can't remember what the turn limit is, but I'd be like, you know, you must clear this chapter within 15 turns. And then in the top left corner while you're playing, there would be like a countdown, like, you know, 15 turns remaining, 13 turns, you know, 5 turns remaining to reach the Gaiden chapter. And that would make it so that I can play through the game without having to go to the Fire Emblem wiki or going to Serene's Forest every, you know, few minutes to make sure that I don't forget one of the secret requirements for something. It's just something that I'm not a fan of. And on that note, I'm not a big fan of Fog of War. It's my least favorite mechanic in all of Fire Emblem. And this game has a lot of fog maps. And that's probably the main thing for me keeping it out of the S tier, because other than that, I actually have a lot of love for this game. And even though the characters are very basic, I do love them just based on like their designs. It's like, oh, this character has a cool design, this character has a cool design. And the way I play Fire Emblem a lot of times, for me personally, like, you know, I've played these games before, and when I go to replay them, I just skip all of the cutscenes and I mainly focus on the gameplay. So like, you know, if the characters don't have a lot of personality, it doesn't bother me too much in a lot of cases. And the support conversations in Fire Emblem 6 are surprisingly good. There's some funny ones, there's some interesting ones, and you know, if you're okay, well, if I say that, I do have to acknowledge that waiting like 180 turns for Rutger and Deke to have like a conversation isn't probably not the best system that was ever invented. Okay, with that, I'm going to move on to Shadow Dragon. This is probably going to be one of the controversial placements. I do put this in the B tier, and for me, it's actually pretty high in the B tier, which is probably surprising for some of you because, you know, this is a game that gets trashed on a lot. Not a lot of people love this game. You know, it's a remake of an outdated NES game, and it didn't do much to change that. But I think it did like a few things to change it, and it changed the game in just like the right areas that modernized it, while still keeping the simple appeal of a very classic game. So it's like, it feels like I'm playing like a classic NES game, but it has all these modern conveniences that make the game easy to play through. I think the hard mode difficulties in this game are really well done. Like you have, you know, hard mode 1 through 5, and there's so many different difficulties, and you can kind of scale to your level of play. So like normally, you know, I beat a Fire Emblem game, and then I'm like, oh, I'm gonna go to Lunatic, and I'm just gonna like, you know, test my limits. And with this game, when I did that, you know, I could not get through H5. So I went back, I played H2, and then 3, and then 4. And I completed each of those in sequence, and each time I felt like my understanding of the game and my skill at playing the game got a little bit better. And one thing on that note, one thing that's pretty cool about Fire Emblem is that your skills between the games really transfer over. So that experience of grinding through Shadow Dragon from hard 2 to hard 4 really deepened my understanding of, you know, general like strategic gameplay, not just for this game, not just knowledge of the maps in this game, but like understanding, you know, how to manage my units effectively and positioning and things like that. I still have not completed H5. I've attempted it a few times, but I've never been able to get all the way through it yet. And I do want to come back to that one day, but as you're going to find later on the tier list, if I'm playing my DS, I'm probably playing Fates, and if I'm not playing Fates, I'm probably playing Awakening. So I don't come back to Shadow Dragon all that often. Next, I want to get out of the way the games that I either haven't played or I haven't played enough to give a real fair rating of. So the games that I'm not really hyped about, as you can see on the bottom of the tier list, I'm breaking these up into basically my hype levels. The games that I'm not really hyped about are Fire Emblem 1 and Fire Emblem 3. I talked about the modern conveniences of Shadow Dragon. And, you know, for me, convenience is one of the really big things that I look for in my gaming experience. And while I do think that like Fire Emblem 1 especially has like a, you know, a place in the history of gaming, and it's sort of like it's like a relic. It's like an artifact that's kind of sitting there in the museum. And I'd like to go and look at it one day and play it a little bit more. But I don't think I'm going to enjoy it very much. I'm not really that hyped to play it. Now, one interesting thing I will say about Fire Emblem 3, this is actually the first Fire Emblem game that I ever played, and I didn't even know it at the time, that it was a Fire Emblem game, or, you know, that it had a place in this series. I was playing through a lot of different Super Nintendo games, and I had played so many games already that I got to the point where I started looking for games that were in Japanese. And so I downloaded this game, and I don't think it had a translation at the time, or if it did, it probably did, but I think like I just didn't really understand like how to download a translation patch for a game and how to patch it. So I tried playing the game in Japanese. I didn't get too far through it, but I thought it was pretty interesting. I grew up playing games like Shining Force, and so I was already pretty familiar with strategy RPGs. And so when I played this, I was like, this is really cool. Like, I want to play more of this, but I have no idea what's going on, and I can't even read the menus. And now today, I've played a lot of Fire Emblem, and I also can read and write a little bit of Japanese. So it would be interesting, to get an experience like that again, trying to play a Fire Emblem game, or any game really, in another language, and maybe try to find my way through it and understand what's going on. But in terms of actually playing Fire Emblem 3 ever again, I'm not that hyped, I'll be honest. Now, Genealogy of the Holy War is a game that I'm really excited to play in the near future. I have played the prologue before, but I haven't gotten any further through the game. So the thing is, what I would very much enjoy doing is streaming my first playthrough of this game, and I don't have the time in my schedule to do this right now, which means, honestly, not only are the hype levels pretty high for me already, but they're actually building, because it's like I want to play right now, but I can't do it. I have to wait until I can clear up my schedule so that I can stream the game. And so that's going to be really awesome. And on that note, Thracia 776, it's kind of basically in the same boat. After I play Genealogy, I'm going to play Thracia right afterwards. And I think the release of Engage is actually what made me, very excited to go back and look at Genealogy again. So if their strategy with Engage was to build up hype for these classic games and make people want to go play them again, I would say for me that it really did succeed. Engage, I actually haven't played yet. It's very high on my hype list as well. Everything that I've heard about it makes it actually sound very appealing to me. I know people don't like the story and they don't like the characters, but like I said, I'm gonna, when I replay these games, I'm gonna skip the cutscenes anyway. So all I care about is the gameplay, and what I've heard about the gameplay makes it sound really awesome to me. So I will get around to playing Engage as soon as I can. It's just not on the menu right now for me. And then lastly, we have Fire Emblem Echoes. I was staying with a friend for a little while, and he had this game, and he allowed me to borrow it, but it was actually right before I moved out. So I played a little bit of the game, and then it was like, well, I'm going to move away soon, so I have to give this back to you because I'm going away. And I didn't get a chance to play through Echoes completely, but what I did play, I enjoyed, and I do want to come back to it eventually, but I would like to play Engage first. I would like to play Genealogy first and Thracia, but, I will get to Echoes. Next, I want to talk about Path of Radiance and Radiant Dawn. These are games that I have played, but it was a very long time ago. This was during a period of my time where I wasn't really playing very many games, and I didn't get as much into them as I do now. So when I played Path of Radiance, when I played Radiant Dawn, I think I got halfway through each game, and I played them very casually. I don't have super strong memories of them. Now, some people might think it's unfair for me to put them in the C tier. To me, they felt at the time, based on how I feel right now, they felt like pretty average, pretty normal Fire Emblem games. They didn't stand out too much to me, but I think that when I do replay them, I will probably enjoy them a lot more. It's just, it has to happen, and I don't know if it's going to happen anytime soon, because it's not like I'm going to, miraculously come up with a GameCube or a Nintendo Wii so that I can play these games that they won't just port to new systems, unless there are newer ports that I don't know of. But either way, and honestly, here, let me say this too, for the people who love Path of Radiance, and the fact that I've rated Path of Radiance and Radiant Dawn right next to each other just kind of shows that my memories of them aren't very strong. They kind of blend together in my head right now, and I know that people like Path of Radiance more than Radiant Dawn. A lot of people do. So when I come back to the games, my opinion on them is probably going to improve, and they're going to be a little bit more fleshed out and differentiated in my memories. But they're just not there yet. And now let's get to the good stuff. I want to talk about a game that I absolutely love, and that is Fire Emblem Fates. I alluded to a little bit earlier. So a lot of people say that Conquest is, much better than Birthright, or they say Conquest, good gameplay, Birthright, bad gameplay. I think that's a pretty unfair assessment. I think Birthright is very underrated. I'm going to get both games, Conquest and Birthright, right up there in the S tier. These are just fantastic games, in my opinion. They're peak Fire Emblem. I absolutely love the mechanics. So they basically took everything that was wrong with Awakening, and they just fixed it. Like the pair-up system, You don't have this like random chance to sometimes get a pair up attack. It's like if you're standing next to somebody, they will do a dual attack with you, and you can plan around that, and you can plan your strategy around that. And like you don't have this random chance for your partner to sometimes guard for you. It's like if you're paired up with somebody, every 4 attacks or every 3 attacks, they will guard for you, and you can plan your strategy around that. And there's just so much depth to the positioning of the combat in this game. It's just incredible. Just this is my opinion, but I really think this is, for me, like I know a lot of people view the Game Boy Advance games as the golden age of Fire Emblem. For me, I think just Fates is just like peak Fire Emblem. Another fantastic thing is that in Awakening, they had this system where like you could switch between different classes, and there were all these different skills that you could master, and you can make builds that like took skills from one class and applied them to another class. There was a slight issue with this in Awakening. About 90% of the skills just are basically useless, whereas in Fates, the skills, like there's so many skills that you can actually find a way to use. And in particular, there are these really interesting skills that change how you play the game, like Shove, Shelter, and Swap. So Shelter basically brings back these like awesome rescue drop mechanics that you had back in the GBA games, but it adds like even more depth to them because of how the pair-up system works. And then you have like Shove and Swap that allow you to like reposition your units. They make tanking units like so much better because you can switch your units around, and you can do things like you can have a lead unit run in and like kill something, or like say you're doing an Iron Man and your lead unit rushes in but they miss like an essential attack. What you can do is you can use the swap command to like move them behind you, and like now suddenly you've got a better, like a more optimal unit in front of them. And then you can stick someone like Xander in front of the tank, because the enemy is never going to attack Xander. They're just going to ignore him. So all they can do is they can run up to Xander, and then they have to like throw a javelin at your tank, and they can barely deal any damage to them. They can only hit them once, and it's going to ruin their crit rate and their hit rate and their accuracy. There's so many interesting things that you can do. And the other thing is that the access to the class sets is just phenomenal. It's in that sweet spot. I like to call it, it's like the Goldilocks like sweet spot. So in Awakening, there was an issue in the fact that your units, let's take Gaius, for example. He had a very specific class set, and you could never expand that class set. So his build is always limited to those exact classes that he starts with. And then in Three Houses, for me, the problem is that every character can just become every class, and so there's really no limit to what you do. Like, everybody can just do everything. But Awakening is like right there in the middle, where characters have their default class sets. But then if you marry somebody, you can get a new class set. And if you become friends with somebody, you can get a new class set. And this makes it so that like every character can like technically do everything, but you can't have every character in your army doing every build in every playthrough. It's like you're limited to what a character can do in a single playthrough. It makes these games very replayable and very interesting to me personally. And I also love how the child units were handled in this regard, because there's so many interesting decisions you can make for like how you want to pass down skills to the children, on top of like factoring in like what are the growth rates of the potential parents, what skills can they pass down. And if you want to make a unit in this game like really phenomenal, like you can plan around it to the point where like you can set Corrin's like Bane and Boone and even their natural talent, so that the person that they marry can get access to like a specific class that would be impossible for them to get otherwise. And so they pass down like these growth rates that will make a really optimal child unit. It's just mind-blowing, like the amount of thought that you can put into these games. Now, I do think Conquest has some of the best maps like in Fire Emblem history, so I do rank it above Birthright. But I don't think Birthright is that much different or that much worse. It's like if you love the mechanics of Fates as much as I do, then you're going to love playing Birthright just as much as you love playing Conquest. That's what I think. With that being said, let's talk about Revelations. So the map quality and the game design of Revelations, I feel like, is so much worse than Conquest and Birthright that I actually do rank it lower. And it's not even just a little bit lower, it's actually significantly lower. I kind of put it at the bottom of B tier. It still has those peak like Fates mechanics, but there's so many maps that just aren't very fun to play through. And like at the beginning of the game, you have like 3 units. I'm going to be a little bit hyperbolic here, but at the beginning of the game, you have like 3 units that you have to use for like the first 10 chapters. It's just so silly. And then like you're like, oh, well, finally, like, here's a route where, I get characters from the Hoshido side and the Norian side, and I can pair them together. And then, whoever directed this game was like, yeah, Or what if we have the characters join up in a way so that it's like really difficult to actually pair anybody up from the route splits? It's just, you know, they had something, they could have made something special, and they really failed to live up to the potential of what Revelations could have been. Next, let's talk about Fire Emblem Gaiden, also known as Fire Emblem 2. For me, this is the only D-tier Fire Emblem game. I don't think it was a very enjoyable experience. It's similar to my experience in playing it is similar to Path of Radiance and Radiant Dawn. I played it during the time where I wasn't super into video games, but I did play through, I think, a little bit more than half of this game, but I really wasn't enjoying it, and I couldn't even see it through to the end. This is a game that I don't even think I will come back to ever again. I'll play Echoes, you know what I mean? It's like I'm going to play Echoes. I won't say too much else about it because I think every game on this list is probably, you know, somebody out there, it's your favorite game, so I don't want to sit here and trash your favorite game, but for me personally, I didn't get much enjoyment out of playing this. Next, let's talk about New Mystery of the Emblem. It's very similar to Shadow Dragon, but I find the major difference for me is that Shadow Dragon knows what it is, and it doesn't try to be anything different. It kind of thrives in the simplicity of the gameplay and like how fast it is. Like, you know, when I played H3 for the first time, I did nothing but play Shadow Dragon for like 2 days straight, and I just breezed right through the whole thing. And you can't really do that with New Mystery. It's like trying to be like a newer Fire Emblem game, but it's just not. It's like it's still based on an NES game, and they add all this stuff to it, and it for me it just slows down the game, and it makes it takes away some of the charm. So for me, this one's kind of near the bottom of the C tier. Although this is another one where, like, if I do replay it one day, you know, maybe I will find another appreciation for it. The next game I want to talk about is Fire Emblem 8. Now, I do have a good love for all of the GBA games, and I rank them all fairly equally. This one was pretty difficult for me to place because it's a very easy game. So if I want to challenge myself, I'm usually not going to play it. If I wanted to have a hard time and play Fire Emblem 8, I guess what I would do is I would play on hard mode, and I would restrict myself so that I wasn't using Seth, and I wouldn't grind at all. And that would be a pretty interesting experience. Other than that, if you're going to play it, it's going to be a more casual, like laid back experience. But that being said, I do still think it's very fun for what it is. I like a lot of the characters. I don't remember exactly who said this, but I remember watching another YouTuber, and they mentioned that they don't really like the main story of Fire Emblem 8, but there's a lot of interesting side stories and character arcs that are going on throughout, and I pretty much agree with that. Although at the end of the day, I just skip all the cutscenes and I just, you know, focus on the gameplay, so what can you really say about it? One thing about this game that's really cool is that it's less deterministic than the other GBA games because of the fact that you have split class lines, and then you also have the training units who can promote twice, and so they can promote into like 4 different directions. And it's pretty cool that you have the ability to do that. You can kind of see that this game was like a precursor to a lot of the mechanics that went into like Awakening and Fates later on. And I remember, you know, back in the day, this game used to get a lot of flack for things like you know, like this game has the Tower of Valny, so you can just grind as much as you want, and it makes an easy game even easier. And to that I say, you know, nobody's forcing you to go into the Tower of Valny. I never really understood that complaint. People had felt like they had to have a strong opinion about whether Fire Emblem 7 or Fire Emblem 8 was like the better game. And nowadays, I feel like that's just completely gone. Nobody really cares. But you know, at least they care enough to make tier lists on YouTube still. So, but I do think, for me personally, Fire Emblem 8 is like slightly better than 7, and you know, I have a strong attachment to 6, which is probably why 6 is at the top. But all 3 of these games are great. I put them all in the A tier. I think they're all fantastic in their own way, and it's very clear why so many people are in love with this franchise today, and a lot of them were introduced to these games by playing the GBA games, and the love for these games and the fandom for these games has persisted for so many years that it's insane. It really shows just how fantastic these games are. Next, I want to talk about the last controversial placement on the list, and this is going to be Fire Emblem Three Houses. So let me say, because I know that a lot of people really love this game, and for many people, this was their first Fire Emblem game, and this is how they got into the series. So I know a lot of people love this game a lot more than I do. It's responsible for, you know, another resurgence in popularity of Fire Emblem not too long ago. It brought in a lot of people who wouldn't have played these games otherwise. I think that Fire Emblem Three Houses is a fantastically well-made game, and everything that it sets out to do, it really accomplishes. Like, it does a very great job at the things that it wants to do. So my issue personally is that it just doesn't do the things that I really want from Fire Emblem. So let me explain what I mean. I talked about how the mechanics in Fates were like my favorite mechanics in all of Fire Emblem, and those improved upon what, you know, started in Awakening. So you had these mechanics, you had these great ideas in Awakening, and then in Fates, you refined them and you just made them even better, and you made them like absolutely perfect. And I was like, I can't wait to see the next Fire Emblem game and just like how they're gonna make these ideas even better. And instead, what they decided to do was they removed all the stuff that I loved. They removed the pair-up system. They removed the class sets. They removed the child inheritance units, and they removed the infinite weapon uses, which is another thing that I really loved about Fates. So in Fates, your weapons don't break, but every weapon has like one interesting quality about it that makes it like slightly different. Like the silver weapons, you know, they debuff you after you use them. But the steel weapons, they lower your speed, but they're stronger, you know, than the iron weapons, which are more accurate. And there's just all these interesting considerations. And Three Houses just kind of brought back the system where like your stronger weapons are just going to break, and so you have to pay more money to replace them, which is like, okay, sure. I don't want to trash the game too much, but I guess while we're in like a little bit of a negative space, I will say like some of my other complaints about Three Houses. The maps, we have to talk about the maps. I'm sorry, but the maps in this game are huge and empty, and for somebody who skips the cutscenes and goes right into the maps, well, I gotta tell you, I can skip the cutscenes, but then I have to spend like 10 minutes running around the monastery. And then when I do that, like I get into this map that's just like a big open area, and there's nothing, you know, tactically interesting for me to do. Like in Fire Emblem 6, you have all these rivers and mountains to play around. And in Fates, like you have like these incredibly creative battlefields with like multiple like combat lanes where you're managing all these units. And then, you know, it's like you go to Three Houses and it's just like a big open map with like nothing. That's my opinion, and for some people don't care about that stuff as much, whereas for me that's something I care about a lot, and that's one of the reasons why for me I put this game into the C tier. There is one other minor issue, and I guess I'll just address it. I have a lot of experience teaching, and if I consider myself anything, I probably consider myself to be a teacher, and I don't like some of the stuff that Byleth does, like as a teacher. And it does bother me. Like, if I'm gonna role play, like I don't want to role play as a teacher who's gonna date their students. Like that just it makes me uncomfortable. And something I really don't like is how Byleth convinces students to like leave their curriculum and join his or her class. I find like that really goes against what I think is like good teaching practice. Like I would never go to a student and I'd be like, you know, you need to drop this class and like come join my class. And then like the real reason Byleth wants them to do it is so that like they can make use of them as a soldier. It's just like, and make them turn against their own country. It's just like influence their political and like their philosophical beliefs. It's just it's really weird, and it's like yes, technically you don't have to date your students, and like yes, technically you don't have to recruit students from other houses, but if you don't do those things, you're missing out on core gameplay mechanics. So, you know, those do negatively affect my impression of the game. Maybe it's in a minor way. I'm not really sure. I mean, the game still ends up in the C tier. I still think it's fun. It's fun to play, but it's difficult to play. It's hard for me to sit down and play through this game because it's harder to just skip through the cutscenes and just play the game. But I will praise it on one point, and that is the way that it managed to draw in all of these new fans with the wonderfully deep story and characters. There's so much going on in this game in terms of like morality and philosophy and ethics. You have, you know, basically three main characters, and each of them can be the hero or the villain, depending on, you know, the decisions that you make in the game. And I think what this was an inheritance of the concept from Fates. Fates wanted to do that, but there was kind of some issues where it didn't work very well, and this is why people say like the story in Conquest is bad. So in Three Houses, they took this concept of, moral ambiguity and having different factions and different routes, and they refined it and they made it better. And they did a fantastic job with it. It's just that for me, like, I'm just going to skip the cutscenes and go to the next map, when I replay the game. So I don't care about that stuff as much. But for the people who love, like, the story and the characters, I can absolutely see how, you would think, or you would feel that this is an improvement over the Fates games. So for people who rate this game higher and they rate my favorite games lower, I don't have any hard feelings. I think your opinion is valid, and it's just that we value different things. Now, for the last game that I'm going to talk about is Awakening, and it's because my opinion on this game actually changed a lot over the years. So if I was making this game, even 2 years ago, maybe even 1 year ago, honestly, I probably would have put Awakening like near the top of the D tier, maybe the bottom of the C tier if I was being very generous. I did not like this game. I hated how the pair-up system was random, and it could actually like mess you up in some ways. Like if you trigger a dual strike, which has like a low % chance of happening in one of the early chapters, you could accidentally kill an enemy that you didn't want to kill, and then this opens up a space for someone else to run in and take out your unit. And I was like, why would you do this? Like, why would you make a game that works this way? I don't understand. But after playing Fates, which, refined these mechanics and improved on them, I really loved Fates, and it always made me want to go back to Awakening every so often and like give it another fair chance and try to play it and see if I can make these character builds work, even though there's only like 10 skills that you really want to use. It was like, what are the interesting ways to get those skills onto your units? And so in the past, I tried to play the game on Lunatic because I have more fun when I play on a harder difficulty, but I just kept running into these walls because the Lunatic mode in this game is so brutal and so difficult. But my ability to play Fire Emblem games really improved over the last couple of years, and I gave Awakening, a fair try finally. And just this year, I would say I got really into it. So my first Lunatic playthrough, I did as much grinding as I wanted to because I felt like, if I'm gonna play on the hardest difficulty, I'll just make sure that I can create units that are capable of, fighting their way through this mess. And that helped me learn the maps, and that helped me learn like how do you want to play Awakening so that you can succeed. And one of the things that you need to do is you need to be very proactive with your units and your momentum. You have to advance your tanks as far as possible into enemy territory every turn, and they need to wipe out as many units as possible every turn. And if you don't do that, if you're trying to turtle like the way you might play some other Fire Emblem games, if you're trying to slow down and go at like a defensive pace, what's going to happen is that your defensive characters are going to get ignored, and the enemies are just going to swarm the rest of your units. And the ones that you couldn't take out this turn, there's 10 more right behind them, and now you have, those 5 that you couldn't take out last turn, plus 10 more, so now you've got 15 units swarming you, and then next turn you've got like 27 units swarming you, and it just doesn't work. Like, that style of play doesn't work. What you need are units that can fight 20 combats on enemy phase. And now let me explain how you do that, and explain why I think the pair-up system is okay. It's not as bad as I originally thought. So on your proactive offensive units, your Gale Force users, what you're going to do is you're going to have them married to somebody so that they have an S support. And this character is going to have like a 50 to 70% chance to land a dual strike. And you're going to have that character run in, okay? And first of all, they're going to get 2 attacks. And let's say that they need to hit both attacks to kill the enemy, but they have a slight chance of missing. Well, if they miss one of those attacks, then they have like a 70% chance for their partner to jump in and land a dual strike. And you get that 70% chance like twice. And then on top of that, when they do their normal attack, they have like a 20% chance to crit, because Awakening characters are just insane. And then on top of that, they have like a 40% chance to proc Luna or Astra, or Aether or something like, it's like there are so many probability chances that like something on your side is going to go right that you can basically rely on it. It's like almost mechanically like inconceivable that Sumia is going to run in there with like Chrom on her side and she's going to fail to kill that enemy. You know what I mean? And then once she kills them, Gale Force activates, and then she can just, run out of there. And here's the thing. Here's the other thing. One aspect of my gameplay that really improved is that I learned how to use rescue staves, not just to skip chapters. You know what I mean? Not just to warp skip, but you can actually use rescue staves as a part of your offensive and defensive strategy. So let's say like that 1 in 1,000 chance happens. Like, what if Sumiya runs in and Chrom doesn't dual strike, and she fails to crit, and she misses one of her attacks, and she doesn't land Luna? Like, what do? Well, you have your staff unit rescue her, and you just pull her back out of harm's way, and then the situation is fixed. You're out, you know what I mean? Like, you're out of danger. And you can even do this intentionally. Like, you can have her run in and kill a unit, and then Gale Force, and then kill a second unit, like even deeper in enemy territory, and then you just pull her back out with a rescue staff again. So it's like, once you start to understand these mechanics, I think Awakening is actually a very interesting game to play. And on the defensive side, the Nosferatu tank is kind of cheesy, but there are other ways to play the game. Like, you can go in with that same mentality with your soul users. Like, you can have a soul user with a para partner that has an S rank, and there's a very good chance for, like, either soul is going to proc, or their partner is going to dual guard for them, or they're going to dodge enough attacks, or the enemies are only doing like 4 damage per hit, where it's like inconceivable that the enemy is going to chip you down from like 60 damage to from 60 HP to 0 HP without you ever landing soul like a single time. And like and your partner is going to be dual guarding like plenty of the attacks to cut down the damage even further. You know what I mean? So like your enemy phase tanks, like if you build them to be reliable, they're going to be extremely reliable. And so as I was kind of growing to appreciate this game more and more, I eventually went in and decided to do another Lunatic run without grinding. And I actually didn't use a Nosferatu tank. I used Vake as my main combat unit, as a hero with soul, and it was really challenging and really fun, and it just made me appreciate so much like the interest, all of the interesting things that this game does. And yes, it does have its flaws, and that's the reason why I'm going to probably put it at the top of the A tier rather than the bottom of the S tier. But it created like so many of these fantastic ideas that Fates would, later come along and improve on and make even better. But now that I have that context, like I can go back and I can play this game and I can really appreciate it for what it is. And, that experience of kind of like growing to love a game that I didn't have a high opinion of before just like makes the memory and the feelings even stronger for me. It makes me appreciate the game even more. So with that said, that's pretty much every game in the Fire Emblem series, and those are my thoughts on every game. I am planning another video right now where I'm doing a mathematical analysis of the units in Fire Emblem 8, and then I'm going to compare, what does the data and the statistics tell us when I compare it against the opinion of maybe like a professional or like a really experienced Fire Emblem player. And let me just say my intent here isn't really to prove anyone wrong. I just think math is really fun, and I think it would be interesting to see what does the math tell us? Like, does it come to the same conclusions that like a human would come to, or does it fail to understand things that are important that a human would understand are important? And on the other hand, it might show us like, hey, this unit that we didn't think was very good, they're actually capable of putting in work with, they don't really need too much investment to do something that you want them to do, and they have more value than we might have thought. So if you love Fire Emblem and you found this video interesting, maybe consider subscribing so you can watch the next one. Also, I'd really appreciate it if you would leave a like on the video. I mean, if you watched it this far, you gotta leave a like, right? But for now, enjoy the rest of your day.